I still remember the sound of the wind that evening. It wasn't strong, not even cold, just a soft breath that moved through the hills like a sigh. The grass bent and shimmered under the pale moonlight, and I could almost hear it whisper my name. My village slept far below the hill. The houses were small, their roofs glowing silver under the moon. I had walked farther than I ever had before, past the shepherd's stones and the old fig trees, following a path I didn't know existed until that night. People often said the hills were haunted, not by ghosts, but by dancers. Old women in the village would speak of them while grinding grain or washing clothes. They dance when the moon is full, they'd say, and if you hear the music, don't follow it. The cave never gives back what it takes. I used to laugh at that, but that night I didn't laugh. Something in the air felt strange, not dangerous, just different. Like the world had stopped moving for a moment to watch me. I found the entrance almost by accident. It was hidden behind a curtain of vines, the kind that smelled of earth and rain. When I brushed them aside, a cool breath of air came from the darkness, touching my face. It smelled faintly of salt and old flowers. I lit my small lantern, the one my grandmother had given me, and stepped closer. The cave looked shallow at first, like it would end after a few steps. But when I crouched and held the lantern low, I saw a narrow passage leading deeper inside, curling like a sleeping snake. My heart began to beat slowly, not with fear, but with wonder. It was as if the night itself had opened a door for me. Inside, the air was cool and still. The walls glimmered faintly in the lantern light, small crystals perhaps, or just wet stone. The sound of my footsteps echoed softly like someone walking behind me. I stopped, but the echo stopped too. After a few minutes, I reached a wider space. It was a round chamber with a high ceiling, and at the center stood something strange. A stone bowl, carved from the floor itself. It was filled with water, so still that it looked like glass. Around it, someone had drawn circles in the dust, dozens of them, like the marks of dancing feet. I knelt beside the bowl and looked into it. My reflection was faint, rippled by the lantern light, but then I noticed something moving behind me. A shimmer, a flicker. When I turned, the walls seemed alive. Shapes moved in the corners, soft white shadows like women in flowing robes. They didn't have faces, but I could feel their presence, calm and kind, not frightening at all. Music began, soft, like wind over strings. I don't know where it came from, but it filled the cave gently, wrapping around me like a blanket. The women began to dance. Their movements were slow, graceful, and almost sad. They twirled around the stone bowl, their robes glowing faintly in the dark. I wanted to move closer, but something in me whispered, "Stay still. Watch." So I did. Their dance told a story, though I didn't understand it then. It was about love and loss and waiting. Every motion, every turn of the wrist carried meaning, like waves folding back into the sea. And then, one of them, taller than the rest, turned toward me. Even without a face, I could feel her eyes. She moved closer, and the air grew warmer. My lantern flickered, and the flame almost went out. She reached out her hand, thin and bright as moonlight, and touched the water in the bowl. The reflection changed. It was no longer me I saw, but a woman standing on the same hill long ago, holding a jar of light. Behind her, the same cave shimmered like a pearl. The image lasted only a second, then vanished. The woman's shadow pulled her hand away and lowered her head as if in sorrow, and slowly, one by one, the dancers began to fade, their robes turning to mist, their music sinking back into silence. When they were gone, only the faint sound of dripping water remained. I stood there, unable to move, the echo of their dance still beating in my chest like a second heart. I didn't know how long I had been there, but when I stepped outside, the moon was lower in the sky. The grass glowed softly and the air smelled of rain. As I walked back toward the village, I looked over my shoulder one last time. The vines had closed over the entrance again, as if the cave had never existed. But I knew it was real. I could still feel the rhythm of the dance in my feet, and the image of that woman, the one in the water, burned quietly in my mind. Who was she? And why did they dance for her? That night, I dreamed of the cave again, and this time, the woman in the water spoke my name.
I woke up before dawn, though I had barely slept. The dream had been soft, but it clung to me like mist. I could still hear her voice, quiet, almost like a breath in my ear, calling my name from the darkness of the cave. It wasn't frightening, it was longing, like someone who had waited too long to be heard. The sun hadn't risen yet. The world outside was pale and blue, and the village still slept. Smoke curled lazily from one or two chimneys, and roosters were just beginning to stir. I sat by the window, watching the light change, thinking about what I'd seen. Had it really happened? The dancers, the music, the reflection in the water. It all felt too real to be a dream, yet too strange to be true. By morning, I had decided to go back. The path looked different in daylight. The grass was dry and golden now, and the stones that had glowed under the moon were dull and ordinary. The vines covering the cave were still there, heavy and green, hiding the entrance completely. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined everything, but when I reached out to touch the vines, they moved. Not like leaves in the wind, but like something alive, remembering me. Beneath them, I saw the faint outline of the cave's mouth again. I stepped inside. This time, there was no music, no movement, just silence, deep and soft, like a blanket. The air was cool and smelled faintly of jasmine. The floor still held the marks of dancing feet, though some had been brushed away by falling dust. The stone bowl stood in the center, still full of water, its surface calm as glass. I knelt again and looked into it. For a long moment I saw only my own reflection, tired eyes, dusty hair, the faint tremble of my hands. Then, slowly, something shifted in the water. Ripples moved across the surface, though I hadn't touched it. The image deepened. I saw the same woman as before, the one who had appeared in the cave the night before. Her face was clearer now. She had dark hair braided with white flowers and a long dress made of something that shimmered like moonlight on silk. She looked straight at me. Her lips moved, though I couldn't hear her words at first. Then the sound reached me, faint, like an echo traveling across water. "Why did you return?" she asked. I froze. My voice felt caught in my throat, but somehow I managed to whisper, "I don't know. I saw you. I saw your dance." Her eyes softened. "Then you saw our sorrow," she said. I wanted to ask more, who she was, what had happened, but the reflection began to fade. "Wait," I said quickly. "Please, tell me your name." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "My name was Lale, and once we were free." Then the water went still again. My reflection stared back, pale and shaking. I touched the surface gently, but it was just cold stone water once more. That evening, I went to see the oldest woman in the village, Grandmother Ida, who remembered stories older than most graves. She lived near the fig trees, and her house always smelled of herbs and smoke. When I told her where I had gone, she grew very quiet. Her wrinkled hands stopped moving, and she looked at me with eyes like faded amber. "The cave of the dancing women," she murmured. "You shouldn't have gone there." "Why?" I asked. "Who were they?" "I saw one of them. She called herself Lale." At that, Ida's face changed. She leaned back in her chair, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Lale. That name has not been spoken in many years." She told me that long ago, before our village existed, there was a small tribe that lived in these hills. They were known for their music and their dances, which they performed for the moon. Their leader was a woman named Lale, graceful and wise. She believed the moon gave life to the earth and that their dances kept the balance between day and night. But one year, the rains did not come. The earth grew dry and the people grew hungry. The men blamed the dancers. They said the women's songs had angered the spirits. When Lale refused to stop the dances, the men locked her and her dancers inside the cave, sealing it with stones. "They danced one last time," she said, her voice trembling, "to ask the moon to forgive the cruelty of men. And when the moon rose, their bodies turned to light." A shiver ran down my arms. "So they're still there?" I whispered. Ida nodded. "Their spirits dance when the moon is full. The cave holds their memory, and anyone who sees them carries their rhythm forever." That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside the window sounded like music again, faint but familiar. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I felt the rhythm of their dance inside me. Gentle, flowing, sorrowful. My feet began to move under the blanket, almost without my will, as if remembering steps I had never learned. I dreamed again of Lale. She stood in the cave, her eyes full of light. Behind her, the other women moved slowly, their faces calm. "You carry our story now," she said softly, "but you must not let it fade again." When I woke, my room was filled with silver light. The moon was shining through the window, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw her reflection in the glass, smiling. The next morning, I decided to go back one last time. Something inside me said the story wasn't finished, that Lale wanted me to see something more. I packed my lantern again, and this time I carried a small white flower, jasmine, like the scent inside the cave. I didn't know why, but it felt right. A gift, maybe. As I reached the hill, the first rays of evening light touched the stones. The wind rose again, soft and slow, carrying the faintest sound of music. And when I stepped through the vines once more, the air shimmered, as if the cave was waiting for me.
The vines parted more easily this time, as if they had grown used to me. Inside, the air carried a faint sweetness, like flowers hidden under stone. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a breath waiting to be released. I lit my lantern and stepped into the cave once again. The marks of the dancers were still there, faint but clear. The soft circles in the dust, the shine of footsteps worn smooth by years of memory. The stone bowl gleamed in the lantern's glow, and the water inside it was as still as ever. But tonight, something about it seemed different, alive, as if it had been waiting. I placed the jasmine flower beside the bowl. Its white petals caught the light, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw them tremble. Then, from somewhere deep within the cave, a sound began to rise, faint, like the whisper of a distant tide. It was not music, not yet, but it carried the same rhythm as before, slow, patient, calling. "Lale?" I whispered. The echo answered softly, "Come deeper." A narrow path I hadn't noticed before opened behind the stone bowl, a thin crack in the wall, large enough for a single person to pass through. The light of my lantern flickered along the stone, and I saw that the passage sloped downward. I hesitated for a moment, then took a breath and began to walk. The air grew cooler as I went. Drops of water hung from the ceiling and fell into small pools, each sound like the tick of a slow clock. The walls glittered with faint minerals, like trapped stars. My footsteps echoed gently, blending with the rhythm of dripping water. It felt less like a cave now, and more like a temple, old, quiet, and sacred. After a long walk, I reached a small opening. Beyond it was another chamber, round and smooth, with carvings along the walls. I raised my lantern to see them better, and what I saw made my breath catch. The carvings showed women dancing beneath a full moon, their arms raised, their robes swirling like waves. Around them were men holding torches, their faces carved with anger. And in the center of the wall was Lale herself, her arms outstretched, her face calm, a moon carved above her head. Beneath the carving, there were symbols I couldn't read, but I felt their meaning, something about forgiveness, about waiting for the world to remember. And then I saw it, a narrow crack below the carving, just wide enough to fit my hand. Inside, something glimmered. I reached in carefully and pulled it out. It was a small silver pendant, shaped like a crescent moon. The metal was cool to the touch, though it seemed to hum faintly with warmth, as if it remembered its owner. On its back, a single word was carved, Lale. I held it in my palm, and suddenly the air shifted. A soft wind stirred inside the cave, impossible, but real. The flame of my lantern trembled, and in that quivering light, they appeared, the women. They stood in a circle around me, their forms glowing faintly, their robes like moving clouds. At their center was Lale. "You found it," she said, her voice like the sound of the sea under moonlight. "This was the heart of our promise." I looked down at the pendant. "What is it?" I asked. "Our dance was not for worship. It was a promise that we would keep the light alive, even when darkness tried to silence us. When they sealed the cave, we danced one last time, binding our souls to the moon's rhythm so our story would not die with our bodies. Her eyes softened as she stepped closer. But we have been waiting too long. The world above has forgotten us. The moon still rises, but no one dances anymore. The other women bowed their heads. The air shimmered with quiet sadness. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Lale smiled faintly. "Remember us," she said, "and dance for us under the open sky." I shook my head slightly. "I don't know how." She reached out her hand. It glowed like silver smoke. "You already do," she whispered. "It lives in your heart now, our rhythm, our story." Then gently, she touched the pendant in my hand. A warmth spread through my palm, rising up my arm like a heartbeat. For a moment, the cave filled with music again, soft, sorrowful, but full of hope. The dancers began to move, slow and graceful, their feet barely touching the ground. Their robes shimmered like moonlight on water. Lale looked at me one last time. "When the moon is full again, come to the hill, bring the pendant, set it under her light, and we will dance our last dance." The music faded. The women disappeared, one by one, leaving only a faint glow in the air and the scent of jasmine. When I stepped out of the cave, the night sky had deepened. The moon was climbing higher, round and white, painting the hills in silver. I held the pendant tight in my hand, feeling its gentle pulse. The wind brushed my face, soft, steady, like the rhythm of their steps. And though the world around me was silent, I could still hear it, the faint sound of dancing feet echoing in my mind, calm and endless, like a heartbeat in the hills.
The days that followed felt different. The air itself seemed to hum softly, as if the hills were breathing beneath my feet. I carried the silver pendant everywhere, in my pocket by day, under my pillow by night. Sometimes I thought I could hear it singing, a faint note that only I could feel. The moon grew fuller each evening, climbing higher and brighter in the sky, and with each night I felt the pull of the cave more strongly, not like a command, but a memory, calling me home. On the seventh night, the moon was whole again. Its light washed over the fields like milk, soft and endless. The grass shimmered, and the wind was warm, smelling faintly of rain and jasmine. I knew this was the night. I left my house quietly, without a lantern this time. The moon was bright enough to guide me, and I wanted nothing between its light and my eyes. As I climbed the familiar path, the world below seemed to fade away. No village, no houses, no sound of dogs or voices, just the hush of the wind and the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. When I reached the top of the hill, the cave waited just as before, hidden behind its curtain of vines. But tonight, the vines glowed faintly, as if threads of moonlight had woven through their leaves. I touched them gently, and they parted without resistance. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. The stone bowl shone with silvery light, though there was no lantern flame this time, only the reflection of the moon pouring in through a crack in the ceiling, falling perfectly across the water's surface. I placed the pendant beside the bowl and knelt. "Lale," I whispered, "I've come." For a moment there was only silence. Then the water rippled. One by one the dancers appeared, faint, glowing, graceful as mist. Their robes floated like clouds in the still air. At their center stood Lale, her face calm, her eyes full of soft light. "You came," she said, her voice warm. "You kept your promise." I bowed my head. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Lully smiled. "Only what your heart remembers." The music began again, soft at first, like a heartbeat far away. Then it grew, layer by layer, until the cave itself seemed to breathe with it. The rhythm was slow, like waves rising and falling against the shore. I felt it move through me, in my hands, my feet, my chest. Without thinking, I stood. The dancers formed a circle around the bowl. Lolly stepped back, her hand lifting slightly, guiding me to join them. I hesitated, my heart racing, but then something within me moved. My feet began to follow the rhythm, gentle and sure. The ground beneath felt warm, alive. Each step came naturally, a memory I didn't know I had. My arms flowed with the air, tracing shapes like the wind through branches. The music filled every corner of the cave, not loud but complete, as if the world outside no longer existed. The women began to glow brighter. Their movements grew lighter, faster, though never rushed. Their robes shimmered like water. Their feet barely touched the earth. The light from the moon grew stronger too, pouring down through the crack above, bathing us all in silver. I could feel Lale's gaze on me. "You carry our rhythm," she said, her voice blending with the music. "You are the bridge between the living and the forgotten." I wanted to answer, but words felt too small. Instead, I danced. The air swirled around us, full of light and motion. The scent of jasmine filled the cave again, stronger now, fresh and alive. The sound of footsteps, soft and steady, blended with the rhythm of my heart. It felt like floating, like breathing inside a dream. Then suddenly, the music began to change. The rhythm slowed, deepened. The dancers began to move closer together, their circle tightening. The light around them grew brighter, almost blinding. Lale stepped forward, her arms rising toward the moonlight. "Now," she said gently, "the last dance." A beam of light spilled down from the crack above, striking the pendant on the ground. It glowed with a soft silver fire, and then lifted slowly into the air. The dancers began to fade, their forms turning into strands of light that wove themselves around the pendant. Lale looked at me, her smile full of peace. "You freed us," she whispered, "but remember us always. The dance lives only as long as someone remembers the rhythm." Her figure began to dissolve, the edges of her robe melting into light. I reached out instinctively. "Wait!" She placed her glowing hand over mine and said, "We will not be gone. We will become the wind, the music in the hills, the whisper in your dreams." And then she was gone. All of them were. The cave was suddenly still. The pendant drifted slowly back to the ground, landing gently at my feet. I picked it up. It was warm, warmer than before, and I could still feel the faint vibration of their dance within it, like a heartbeat made of light. I stepped outside. The sky was vast and silver, the moon high above the sleeping hills. The air shimmered faintly, and for a moment I thought I saw them again, the silhouettes of the women, dancing across the grass, their robes flowing like mist. Then the wind rose, soft and steady, carrying the scent of jasmine down toward the valley.
I smiled and closed my eyes. The rhythm was still in me, calm and endless. They were free now, but they had left their light behind. In the hills, in the wind, and in me. The next morning, the world felt new. Not brighter, not louder, just softer, as if every sound had been wrapped in silk. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was clear. I could still feel the rhythm of the dance in my body, in my breath, in the slow beating of my heart. When I opened my hand, the pendant lay there, glowing faintly in the sunlight. It was beautiful, smooth and curved like the moon itself. But more than its beauty, it felt alive. When I held it close, I could sense a pulse inside it, soft and steady, like a living thing. I placed it around my neck, and a calm warmth spread through me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. The village went about its usual rhythm that day. Children chased chickens through the dusty lanes, the baker shouted cheerfully from his window, old men sat beneath the fig trees, arguing about the weather. Everything looked ordinary, yet I saw it all differently now. When I passed Grandmother Ida's house, she called out to me. Her old eyes studied the pendant immediately. "So," she said softly, "you went back." I nodded. "They're free now." Ida smiled, a slow, gentle smile. "Ah, I wondered when it would happen." She motioned for me to come inside. Her small room smelled of herbs and old smoke. On the shelf behind her, tiny jars caught the sunlight like pieces of amber. "Do you know what that pendant is?" I shook my head. "It's not just silver," she said. "It's a heartstone. Old magic from before the time of temples and kings. When someone dances with true devotion, the rhythm becomes a living spirit, and that spirit needs a heart to rest in." I touched the pendant gently. "So this holds their dance?" Ida nodded. "Their rhythm, their memory, their peace. It will follow you now, maybe for the rest of your life." For a moment, I felt heavy, as if something enormous had been placed quietly on my shoulders. But Ida only smiled again, her wrinkles deepening kindly. "Don't be afraid," she said. "It's not a burden, it's a blessing. You've carried sorrow, now you carry song." That night, I couldn't sleep. The moon wasn't full anymore, yet its light seemed to follow me through the window. The pendant glowed faintly on my chest, and sometimes I thought I could hear a sound, the soft rhythm of bare feet moving in circles. When I closed my eyes, I saw them, not in the cave, but in the open air, dancing beneath the stars. Lale turned toward me, her eyes calm and bright. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "Yes," I answered, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking aloud or only dreaming. "It's the song of remembering," she said. "As long as it beats, we will never fade." I felt her hand on my shoulder, warm, light as breath, and when I opened my eyes, the night was still, but the air was full of that rhythm again, soft, slow, alive. Days passed. I began to notice small changes around the village. The old fig trees near Ida's house started blooming earlier than usual, their leaves deep green even before the rains. Children began humming an unfamiliar tune while they played, soft and circular, like a dance. Even the wind that crossed the hills carried a gentler sound. It was as though the land itself was remembering. One evening, as I walked past the fields, I saw something shimmer above the grass. Dozens of fireflies moved together, swirling in slow, graceful circles. The pattern was familiar, the same steps the dancers had taken in the cave. I stood there watching, smiling through quiet tears. They weren't gone. They had become part of everything: the wind, the song, the little lights in the night. One day, as the sun set, I climbed the hill again. The cave was still there, though now it felt peaceful, empty in a comforting way. The vines had thickened, their leaves deep green even before the rains. I touched the stone wall and whispered, "Thank you." The echo that came back wasn't a sound, it was a feeling, warm, loving, almost like laughter carried by the wind. I sat by the entrance, the pendant resting on my chest. When I closed my eyes, I saw Lale once more. But she wasn't sad now. She was standing on a shore, her robe glowing silver, her hands lifted in calm farewell. "You've done what we could not," she said softly. "You've remembered." Her voice faded like music at dawn, but the peace it left behind stayed. And as I sat there, the hills began to glow faintly in the moonlight, as if the world itself had joined in the quiet dance of light. That night, back in my small room, I lit a candle and placed the pendant beside it. The flame bent slightly toward it, as if drawn to its pulse. I took out a small book and began to write, every detail of what had happened, every sound, every face, every step of the dance. If memory could fade from the air, I wanted it to stay on paper, to last beyond me. When I finished, I whispered to the pendant, "I'll keep your story safe." For a moment, I thought I heard a reply, a soft hum, like the breath of the hills. Then the glow dimmed, and all was still. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something. It wasn't just their story anymore. It was ours, the living and the lost, bound by the same rhythm. The dance had never ended. It had simply changed form. I turned off the candle and lay down, the moonlight falling across the bed. Somewhere outside, the wind moved through the grass in soft waves, and I could hear it again, that gentle, eternal beat. 1, 2, 1, 2. The rhythm of life. The song of remembering.
The days began to pass quietly, like pages turning in a slow book. I still wore the pendant every day. It had stopped glowing now, but it never lost its warmth. When I touched it, I could still feel the faint heartbeat, steady, calm, alive. Life in the village went on as it always had. People worked, laughed, argued, and sang. The world looked ordinary again, yet something small and invisible had changed. The air was lighter, the nights softer, and even the silences seemed kinder. Sometimes when I walked through the market, I caught someone humming a melody I didn't recognize. It was simple and circular, a tune that rose and fell like a wave. It was the rhythm of the dance. At first, I thought it was only in my imagination, but soon others began to notice too. The children would twirl as they played, their bare feet tracing soft circles in the dust. Old women tapped their fingers on baskets as if keeping time to a quiet beat. And on nights when the moon was full, the whole valley seemed to shimmer, as though something unseen was dancing in the fields. One evening, as the sun began to sink, I sat outside my small house, writing in my book. I was trying to describe the dance, but words always felt too small. How could you write the feeling of peace or the sound of light? Just then, a small voice startled me. "Teacher?" It was a girl from the village, Mina, with wide brown eyes and hair always tied in a loose braid. She was holding a basket of herbs and smiling shyly. "Will you tell me the story again?" she asked. I blinked. "What story?" "The one about the cave, the women who danced for the moon." I smiled. "You've heard that one already." "I know," she said quickly, "but I want to hear how it ends again. You tell it better than the old ones." Her words warmed me. I nodded, closing my book. "All right, sit here," I said, patting the step beside me. The evening light turned golden as I spoke, softly, slowly, letting each word fall like the last note of a song. I told her about the cave, about Lale, and about the sorrow that turned to light. Mina listened without moving, her eyes wide, her breath slow and steady. When I finished, she whispered, "Did they really dance, or was it a dream?" I looked up at the hills. The first stars were appearing. I said, "Both, maybe. Some dreams are real. We just have to be quiet enough to hear them." She nodded seriously, as if she understood. Then she said something that made my heart stop for a moment. "When I go to the fields, I can hear music sometimes. It sounds like people moving, but when I turn around, there's no one there." I smiled gently. That's them. They like to visit those who listen. As days turned to weeks, more children began to visit me in the evenings. They wanted to hear the story too, of Lale and her dancers, of the moon and the cave. They brought flowers, candles, and little pieces of silver they found in the dust. I didn't plan for it, but somehow it became a kind of ritual. We would gather by the fig trees at twilight, the sky painted in soft pink and gold. I would sit with my notebook on my knees, and the children would form a circle around me. I told the story again and again, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in song. And soon the children began to move. At first it was just small steps, shy, uneven. But then something inside them seemed to remember. Their arms began to sway, their feet made light circles in the dirt, and their laughter turned into rhythm. They were dancing. Without knowing it, they were dancing her dance. I watched, tears in my eyes, as their movements became smooth, graceful, almost ancient. The setting sun turned their faces gold, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw other shapes moving among them, faint, glowing forms of women, smiling, guiding. Lale and her sisters were there. That night I dreamed again. This time I wasn't in the cave, but standing on the hill under a sky full of stars. The children danced around me, and behind them the women moved in a wider circle, their robes flowing like silver mist. Lale stood across from me, her face radiant, her voice soft as wind. "The rhythm has returned," she said. "The world remembers." I felt the pendant warm against my skin, and I said, "They dance for you." She shook her head gently. "No, they dance with us." Her smile was full of peace, but also something like joy. Then she lifted her hands, and the stars above us began to sway, slow, graceful, endless. When I woke, dawn was just touching the edge of the hills. The pendant glowed faintly for a moment, then settled. I smiled. The dance was alive again. By the next full moon, something wonderful happened. Without any plan, without anyone saying a word, people began to gather on the hill. Men, women, children, even the elders came, leaning on their canes but smiling like they hadn't in years. No one spoke much. Someone brought a drum. Someone else began to hum the tune that had started to spread through the village, the rhythm of the dancers. And then, quietly, we began to move. At first, it was awkward, unsure, but then slowly our steps began to match. The circle formed naturally, our feet tracing the same pattern the women once had made in the dust. The moon rose, watching over us. The air shimmered. I felt the pendant's warmth spread across my chest, and the world seemed to grow lighter, brighter. I closed my eyes, and I could hear them. The sound of soft laughter, the whisper of robes moving through air. The women had come to dance with us again. When the music ended, no one spoke for a long time. We all just stood there, breathing, smiling, looking up at the moon.
The wind moved through the grass like a sigh, and for a moment it felt as if the earth itself was clapping softly. That night, as I walked home, the hills behind me glowed faintly, silver and alive. The cave was no longer a secret, no longer a place of sorrow. It had become something else. A promise.
The night after the dance on the hill, I couldn't sleep. My heart felt too full of music, light, and something I couldn't name. I sat by the window, watching the moon drift across the sky. It looked larger than before, as if it was watching me too. The village was quiet. Only the wind moved, carrying the scent of rain and the echo of footsteps, though I knew no one was walking outside at that hour. Still, the sound was soft, rhythmic, familiar. The dancers. I touched the pendant resting against my chest. It was warm again, glowing faintly beneath my fingers. "You're still here," I whispered. And in the silence that followed, I thought I heard a voice, faint, gentle, like someone speaking from far away. "Come," it said, "one last time." I knew where it wanted me to go, so I put on my cloak and stepped into the night. The air was cool, and the moonlight painted the path silver as I walked toward the hill. Each step felt guided, not by thought, but by memory. When I reached the cave, the vines that covered the entrance moved slightly in the breeze, as if parting to welcome me. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was still and smelled of wet stone and jasmine. The faint blue glow that once filled the cave had returned, soft as mist. I felt my heart beat slow, matching the rhythm I knew so well. 1, 2, 1, 2. A steady pulse of peace. Then I saw her. Lele stood in the center of the cave, her silver robe flowing like water. The other dancers were around her, silent and shining, their faces calm. But something was different this time. The light that filled the cave seemed to come from her. "Welcome back," she said, her voice like wind on water. I smiled, though my throat felt tight. "I didn't think I would see you again," she said. "You are meant to. The dance has returned to the world. The rhythm is alive again. But there is still one thing left to do." I stepped closer. "What is it?" She looked up at the ceiling of the cave, where the moonlight fell through a small opening. "Do you see that light?" she asked. "Yes." "That is the breath of the moon," she said softly. "Long ago, before we were trapped here, we promised to keep the rhythm of the world alive. But when we fell into sorrow, that light was forgotten. The world began to sleep." I frowned. "And now?" "Now," she said, her eyes shining, "you have remembered for us. But the moon's breath still needs a guardian." She reached out her hand toward me. "Will you be that guardian?" For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I wasn't sure what it meant, or if I was worthy. "I don't know how," I said quietly. Lele smiled, a slow, peaceful smile. "You already do. You listened. You remembered. You shared our story. That is what a guardian does." Her words felt like light entering my heart. She moved closer and placed her hand gently over the pendant. It began to glow brighter, filling the cave with silver light. The walls shimmered, and I could see faint carvings appear, circles, spirals, and dancing figures, hidden beneath layers of dust for centuries. Then she whispered, "The rhythm lives through you now. Wherever you go, peace will follow. The world needs dreamers who remember to dance." I wanted to thank her, but my voice failed. Tears filled my eyes. "Will I see you again?" She shook her head slowly. "Not as you see me now, but every time you hear the wind move in rhythm, or the sea breathe, or your own heartbeat, that is us. The dance never ends." The dancers began to move again, slow, graceful, their steps glowing against the cave floor. Lele joined them, her hands raised to the moonlight. The glow grew stronger until the cave felt like a sky full of stars. Then, all at once, the light surged, bright, beautiful, blinding. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was alone. The cave was quiet. The carving still glowed faintly on the walls, but the dancers were gone. Only the pendant remained bright, warm against my chest, as if holding all their light within it. When I stepped outside, the night had changed. The moon was higher, larger, almost golden. The hills shimmered softly, and I could hear faint music, not from the cave this time, but from the air itself. It sounded like thousands of hearts beating in time, steady and calm. The world was dancing. I stood there for a long time, watching the horizon turn pale with dawn. I felt no sadness, only peace. The kind that doesn't speak, only breathes. When morning came, I returned to the village. People greeted me with quiet smiles, as if they somehow knew. Mina ran up to me, carrying a flower crown she'd made. "Teacher, last night I dreamed that the moon was singing." I smiled and knelt beside her. "It wasn't a dream. It was remembering." She placed the crown on my head, giggling. "Then I'll remember too." From that day on, the people of our village danced every full moon. No one led them. No one called them how. They just knew. As if the rhythm had always been there, waiting. And each time they danced, I stood among them, the pendant glowing faintly, the pulse of the moon beating against my heart. Lele's promise had come true. The world was awake again. That night, I wrote the final words in my notebook. This story does not end. They become the air we breathe, the rhythm we move to, the dreams that guide us home. The women of the cave are not gone. They live wherever hearts remember to dance. Then, I blew out the candle, placed the pendant beside it, and whispered, "Good night, Lele." Outside, the wind moves softly through the trees. 1, 2, 1, 2. The rhythm of life. The song of peace.